Welcome, everyone, to At Matters by the Outer Loop, where we create art that matters. I'm Michael Herman, and here on At Matters, we create a space to explore the question, what are we here to do through the lens of art for social change? With me today, I'm super excited. On this week's episode, I have Katie McTeigue.
Hi.
Here she is. We're going to talk to Katie in a minute. Katie is an upstate New York based actor and artist who is both in the original and upcoming productions of 13 Suits and is currently serving as one of the writers for the super cool Inner Enso. Awesome. So, Katie, we're going to get into all of that in a moment, but we always like to start every episode with our 5 things game.
Let's go.
Sweet. Do you want me to give you 5 things first, or do you want to give me 5 things first?
I think I want to go first. So
Sweet.
that's the kind of world I want to live in.
Nice. Let's do it. You go first.
All right. I'm curious to know, what are 5 things that you learned from directing the first 13 Suits that you're taking with you when we go to Chicago?
Wow, that is intense and awesome. 5 things I learned from the New York production of 13 Suits, directing that production, that I'm taking into the Chicago production, right?
Yes.
Cool. Woof. One, definitely the first thing that comes to mind is learning to let go a little bit more than I traditionally do, and probably did, most certainly did in that production. That was one. Two, what's really cool, this just came up. There, as you know, there's so much movement
Mm.
in 13 Suits, in the staging of 13 Suits, that what I learned was I need help
Mm.
and support with that. And what's really great about the upcoming Chicago production is that we're actually going to have a choreographer and a movement director working alongside me. So that's exciting. That's going to be super cool.
I love
I
that.
know, right? Isn't that awesome? Three. So I learned this. I knew this already, but not really firsthand. And I learned this, and I'm taking it obviously into this production for a reason that will become obvious in a moment. And yeah, it's really exciting, inspiring, and going to be super cool and different. But I learned that KD is a powerhouse force of an actor, and but it's going to be in a different role this time. So there's taking what I learned there, but then switching gears a little, but also having you there again. So yeah, that's just going to be phenomenal. I'm so psyched that you're in
Oh,
this
well,
production.
thank you. I'm very
Yeah,
excited too.
cool. That was 3, right? 4. What did I learn directing that? I learned that I need to be. I can often be, as you know, a challenging communicator. And I have learned a lot since that production. And that, this, as you know, that production and this production is a huge team of people between the cast and the production team. Huge. Like this time around, I think it's going to be close to like 40 people. And, communication, as you know, is really important. Clear communication, and concise communication. And yeah, I've done a lot in the last year and a half or so working on that in terms of leading a show and a group of people. So I'm excited to go into this with, I'd say 75 to 80% of a new team, and like about the rest coming from the New York production on both the cast and crew side, and putting some new tools, communication tools in place, which I think will lead to a more successful journey for everyone. Fifth one, the last one, what did I learn? I learned how beautiful this play is, and that what Kathleen Duff has written really speaks for itself. And between the cast and creative team and what Kathleen has written, I can really just let it happen and be there to like maybe guide the ship and knock it a little bit this way or that way every now and then, but mostly like just let it be. So yeah, that was a great question.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Those are great
Oh,
answers.
oh, nice. Cool. My turn. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sweet. 5 things, and we're going to obviously get into this in detail as we get into the episode. 5 things you love about your current jobs, work.
Ooh. Okay, great. I love this question. You're gonna have to help me keep on track though, because I failed
Yeah.
math like 4 times. So I'm
Sweet.
gonna be like, what am I on 7?
I'll
Okay.
do the
Um,
fingers.
one would be that a lot of the work that I have going right now is very flexible, and that allows me to do other cool work. I've probably two of the greatest sort of like actor day jobs right now. And that helps a ton. I think number two is every single thing that I'm working on right now. I feel like I'm doing things that 5 years ago I thought I wouldn't have the capacity for, or didn't have the knowledge base or the skill level for. So I appreciate being able to do what I'm doing now and then look back and be like, see, past KD, we totally could do this. It'll all
Nice.
work out.
Yeah.
Number three. Number three is that they're all creative in some sense, and they're all kind of collaborative in nature as well. I love to work with other people. And I find that every project that I'm involved in, sort of like developing those interpersonal connections, those collaborative skills is all like really crucial to seeing sort of the success of the endeavor. And that's been really fun for me.
Sweet.
Was that number 4?
I feel like that was number 3.
Michael, you were supposed to be looking out for
I
me.
was. My fingers are up.
Okay, that was 3. That was 3.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
so.
All right. I guess you'll see when you edit the audio.
Yeah.
All right. All right. Number 4, then, that I love about what I have going on right now. I feel just genuinely excited about it and grateful. I feel like that's not always 2 words that go with work. And I'm really grateful that I get to say that. I feel like I'm using a lot of like the skills that like are in my bones to want to use in the world in really interesting ways, and I'm grateful that I get to do that. And I think the 5th thing that I love about all the projects I have going on right now is that I can kind of trace either the ethos of the project itself or the company or the peoples that they're associated with. And it's all directly tied to wanting to make the world better in some way. And that's very rewarding for me.
That is nice. That's a nice 5th one. That's a nice one no matter what number it is, but it's like it's a nice 5th one.
That's a nice little like slam dunk. Yeah.
It's not only a slam dunk, but it also is a pass because it like transitions us into the episode really nicely.
That's what I planned.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Right.
It is so because, we're now gonna, get a little more into the episode, which is, obviously going to involve hearing more about all of that, the work you're doing, but also what you were just saying is like what we're about, as and what this podcast is about, and the work that we're all doing and why we're doing it, and what it means to us and to the world. Before we get into that, though, we feel it's always helpful for everybody to know, like, how do we know each other? If you had like one sentence or 2 sentences to say to someone, like, how does the outer loop and Michael and Rachel and Melissa come to know KD?
I know you from, I believe, a Captist email listserv for the original audition call for 13 Suits. But I'm also like 99% sure that I met you at some soiree in upstate New York when Rachel was working in Albany, unless that was a different bald
I
white
think
guy,
you're
which it
right.
could have been, but I'm pretty sure it was you.
There's more than one bald white guy?
None that matter.
Oh, okay, cool. I think you're totally right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But I
totally.
think that's when we really like locked
Yeah,
in.
absolutely. Yeah, no, that's totally right. Um, cool. And we're gonna get more into like what that led to. But for everyone listening and watching, um, can you talk for, a couple of minutes or however long you feel feels right about like who are you? Who's KD? Like meaning like what are you doing right now in life? What's really cool is that, if I say to you like talk about what you do for work, it's nice to know that it's stuff that maybe doesn't feel like work, which is how I feel about work too. So like
Hmm.
what are you doing for work slash, job slash what you enjoy, getting paid to do? And also like what other things are going on for you? Any artistic pursuits, passions, projects going on as well?
Yeah. So I'm an actor. I'm a director and a writer. I love to sing. I love to make people laugh. Any times where all of those things get to coalesce into one work, that's awesome. I think I just mostly find myself grounded in a belief of acting as an art of service. I think acting is about being in service to the other actors you're working with, to your other collaborators. It's a service to the audience, I think, in a paramount way. And also, acting is one of those things where there's an ephemeral nature to it, especially if it's theater. It's either you're there or you're not. Of course, things can be memorialized on film for longer, but I think it's still like any other art form, it's always in conversation with who came before you and who's coming after.
Mm,
So I like being a part of projects where there's a conscientiousness of that. Um, and I think that the projects that I have going on right now all kind of like slide into that sweet spot, which I really appreciate. Gearing up for 13 Suits, of course. There's a film that I worked on as a stand in for the lead. Her name's Mia Kaplan. She's amazing. But the film is called Empire Waste. It came out on September 27th, and it is this amazing sweet, wholesome comedy about a plus size teen who her plus size friend discovers that she has this massive talent for fashion design and encourages her to enter this competition where her designs will be seen. And the whole thing is like so sweet and funny. It's like a really beautiful story about self-confidence and loving yourself and um doing the thing in the body that you're in, which
mm,
for plus size people, especially like plus size young women, can feel like impossible, right? We're always kind of negotiating with the idea of the future thin self that will be able
mm,
to do all the things that we want to do instead of just living in the present, right?
mm.
So that was such a wonderful thing to work on, and I'm so happy to see this come to fruition. Um, and then obviously stuff with Inner Enso is great. I'm like super excited to through this project be able to make a playwriting debut in the spring when we're
Nice.
producing it. So that's super exciting. But
Cool.
yeah, I just love just the collaborative nature of that and being able to connect with all of these different women. Like we're in like 4 different time zones, like 18 different states. Like it's like so far flung, but kind of being able to take advantage of the technology we have available to us
Mm,
to devise in a digital format for something that we'll be able to experience in person together too is so cool.
that's super cool.
Um, what else? And one more thing that I'm working on right now that I'm really excited about is as a director and a facilitator of something called the Elder Ensemble, which is a program through WAM Theater in Lenox, Massachusetts. And that is a devising group of women ages 65 and over. Where Michael Kennedy and I, who's a co-director and a co-facilitator, we're helping sort of guide through a devising process with these women around the theme of the center of the universe. And um, we've had a few rehearsals so far, and I swear, like every time I cry, I mean, I'm like a crybaby anyway. Like we could be doing like Shrek Junior, and I'm like, oh, that song always gets me. Like it doesn't matter, but
Yeah.
they're all just so. These women are just so like creative and willing, and they just have there's no guards up.
Mm,
They've they're just there to share of themselves, and they're all brilliant writers, and so giving. And I don't know, I think women of a certain age are often relegated to the sidelines,
Hmm.
when our culture kind of deems their use is up,
Hmm.
and that keeps happening earlier and earlier. um, and so I just think that this is such a powerful way to subvert that, and
Hmm.
to literally give a center stage to these women who, have such full and this wealth of knowledge and wisdom and heart and creativity, to really let them shine, and give them the space to be seen fully.
That sounds amazing. And when does that culminate in a performance?
It sure does. That is on October 22nd at 3 p.m. at the Elaine Bernstein Theater at Shakes and Co. in Lenox,
Nice.
Massachusetts.
That's super cool.
Yes.
Awesome. And any opportunity anyone ever gets to work with Michael Kennedy, they should take.
Yes. You know
Yeah.
her?
Of course. Don't you
Oh,
remember?
right.
That's where we were rehearsing
Oh,
13 Suits before we moved
right.
into Cap Rep. Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely. Yeah. That's awesome. That's super
Of
cool.
course.
Yeah. Super cool. Super
Yeah.
cool.
This is the first time that I've gotten to work with her, despite, being able to share that building space. And
Yeah.
yeah, she's amazing.
Amazing. That's awesome. Really, you have is there enough time? You're working on a million things at the same time. That's
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah, that's cool. That's cool that you're able to do that, and that that feels good to do, which is super cool.
Yeah. It's very meaningful, because
Yeah.
after I spent close to 2 years, if not a
Mm,
little more, in really severe chronic pain,
hmm.
where sort of life felt sort of reduced to like the
Yeah.
size of a pinhead, right?
Yeah.
Where I really couldn't think of much outside of that current physical experience. So it is
Mm,
very meaningful now to have like all of this momentum going.
mm. That's really cool to hear, and that's also a really nice segue into what I was wanting to talk about next with you, which was the last time, as you mentioned, the last time we worked together, um, which is also connected to what we're going to be working together on coming up soon, is 13 Suits in 2023 in New York, and I think that connects, right? That experience connects.
Are we in 2024?
What year are we in right now?
I think we're in 2024.
Are we in 2024? I think we're in 20. Are we in 2024? We're
We're
in
definitely
2024.
in
Yeah.
2024.
And that show was in 2023, right? I feel
Was it?
like. Was it? I feel like it was in the spring of 2023, wasn't it? It's like a year and a half ago, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
absolutely.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it couldn't have been
Totally.
2022. Um, because I know from that experience, I know that time period for you where you were either still very much in or maybe starting to head a little bit towards the end of that period of the chronic pain and what life was feeling like, especially physically, but I'm sure also mentally for you at that time, was those that show and that period of your life are somewhat overlapping. Yeah.
Yeah, I would definitely say so, especially in just the theme of grief.
Mm,
Um, by the time that we did 13 Suits, I I was experiencing a bit of a temporary phase of relief because of
mm,
some of a medical intervention I'd had at the time that
mm,
did not last, but it carried me kind of through the show. But
yeah.
even then, like I was still very limited in my physicality. Like I remember, you were great about this, but my blocking was extremely limited. It
Yeah.
was literally the extent of the blocking that I had through that entire show was to stand up from a chair, move to a different chair, and sit down at that chair and stay
Yeah.
there. And that was probably the most that I could have managed.
Mm,
um and it was, I guess, to give a little bit more context as to what was going on, I had suffered a lower back injury that created basically just like columns of fire of sciatic pain,
ugh,
like down my leg.
yeah.
And it was like near constant. There was very little interventions that gave me any relief. And my entire body, it felt like, was changing and adapting to
Yeah.
this injury. My body, but also my life. Like I said earlier, like everything felt so, I began to feel so small. but
Hmm.
it was like there were some days where the extent of my own movement was moving from like my bed to the bathroom back to my bed and
Hmm.
staring at a wall. And it was, I had gone from having a lot of momentum in my life to all of that kind of like crashing to a halt.
Hmm.
And as the injury and my experience with chronic pain just kept going longer and longer, I became pretty easily convinced that it was never going to get better.
Oof.
I was like, well, you can kiss the acting thing goodbye. I thought that it was going to be impossible for me to do that again.
Yeah.
Whether or not I met people in this, admittedly very ableist industry who would be willing to work with my limitations, I was convinced that the limitations I had were still too much.
Hmm.
Um, and that honestly, like, I just didn't necessarily was super confident that I was going to make it.
Wow.
Like it was it was a very dark time. And I
Yeah.
remember 13 Suits being at that time, even despite, sort of the subject matter,
Hmm.
being this little beacon of hope for me, where I was like, oh no, wait, this might still be possible. Like we might still be able to do this. As long as we meet the right people and can have the right accommodations.
Hmm.
Um, and then also during that show, which again, about grief, my childhood cat. I don't know
Right.
why I'm laughing. It's definitely not funny, but it's kind of funny in just
No.
the way that it like mounted. But
Yeah.
I lost my childhood cat like two
Yeah.
days before we went into tech.
Yep.
Um, and I was just like, whew. Like
Yeah.
sometimes it's like as I look back on past experiences or shows I've done, it's not even always the subject matter or the place that the show happened or anything about the show itself. Sometimes it's the way that my life will interact with those things
Yeah.
that will impact me in a really big way.
Hmm.
So that was something that was going on at the time too. But I remember just
Yeah.
feeling so just like really honored to be able to be a part of something like that. This very specific story to this, this real person, this real
Hmm.
family in my city that happened,
Hmm.
and to be able to like share in that experience. But now, I'm happy to say that after, yeah, about there was another like year and a half or so where I was still feeling like super not great, but
Hmm.
I'm out of the woods and I feel like I have my body back and my life back. But at the same time, I'm still feeling really conscious of how I shouldn't have felt that way. I
Hmm.
shouldn't have felt like my career was over because I like that something like that had happened to me.
Hmm.
But we do that all the time to people in
Hmm.
this, and not in just in this industry, but just in our culture. We really
Hmm.
just cast the disabled aside. Um,
Hmm.
and it's something that even as I'm feeling better, and I feel very grateful to be, that I never want to forget.
Hmm. Yeah. Are you, and you are feeling better?
Yes, yes,
Yeah. Do you
very
feel
happy to
like, are
say.
you like 100%?
I think so.
Really? So you're not feeling any of the pain anymore, any of the fire?
No, no, there might
That's
be a couple
great.
a little day here and there where it's like a little
Hmm.
twingier, but like
Wow.
no, I'm pretty much back to I don't know
Awesome.
if I'm like back to where I was before. Like I still feel like I have a journey ahead of me in terms of and I think part of what I'm looking forward to with 13 Suits in Chicago is getting back into what this body means. Because
Mm.
I still, earlier when you were talking about how we're going to have like a movement coach and some choreography,
Yeah.
there was like a real part in my nervous system that was like, I'm like, no, like
Right.
that felt really scared.
Sure, sure.
Because I think there are still things subconsciously that I do that are very self-protective.
Yep.
That I'm like, okay, but like, we're gonna have to, it's gonna be
Hmm.
okay. We're gonna work through it.
Yeah.
It's gonna be safe, and like to kind of like prove to myself, like, no, we can
Yeah.
move again. We
Yeah.
can.
Yeah. Wow. It's so interesting too for me to hear you for you and I to have this conversation now, a year and a half after that show, and hear you say like when you were heading into it, because I don't know, I obviously knew what you were going through, but kind of the hindsight and the perspective that you're able to look at it now from and talk about, it strikes me, the language that you use really strikes me in a way that's, it's not surprising and it's so unfortunate and it's ridiculous, but like it never occurred to me that if you felt like you could do it and wanted to do it, we were going to figure out, and because this is how we talked about it back then, like we're going to figure out how to make it work so that you can do it. There was never
Right.
like, but to hear you say that that's not that's if I'm translating what you said correctly, that's more the exception than the rule is awful.
Yeah, I would say at least, and not necessarily in the way that I've been treated in work in the past, but the
Mm.
way that I've often perceived things like audition culture,
Uh,
and booking the job and that sort
hmm.
of edge of
Right.
things.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, I've internalized a lot of, and maybe even in past experiences, but I've internalized a lot of messaging that's like, you know, like fuck your feelings.
Hmm.
If you can't do it, we'll find someone who will.
Right.
This is when rehearsal is. Show up and do your work and do, which I mean that I can get, but
No,
like
I understand.
not
Yeah,
not
yeah,
from like a hard work perspective, but I
sure, sure.
mean like a kind of rigidity
Yeah,
that doesn't account for like the breadth of the human experience,
yeah,
despite being this art form, right?
yeah.
So I
Right.
think it was a lot of anxiety I had about that, but so
Hmm.
there's that, but then there's also, I think, just the overarching. I think those messages would have been there in me anyway, just because of like the ableness, the ableism
Hmm.
of our culture,
Yeah.
which and of the industry, which wants you performing at 100% all the time.
Hmm.
That makes like no accommodation for anything it sees as less than. So
Right.
despite not having any experience with you previously, that would make me feel like
Sure, sure.
Michael's going to be mad and I'm going to get let go from this job
Of course.
because I'm disabled.
Right.
Um, that fear was still there. Like I
Yeah.
remember, I think sending that email to you, kind of trying to explain what was going on, when
Yeah.
you had reached out to us to be like, "Hey, we're mounting this. Like, are you still on board?" And
Yeah.
being like, kind of primed for, he might politely decline, and I'll have to
Sure.
like live with that. But yeah, yeah.
Ah, man. Man, we would have you any day in any way all the time. And everyone who works with you knows that you're lucky to get to work with you.
Aw, thank you,
Um,
Michael.
um, Yeah, I mean, so you touched on a lot of already of like what you had going on in the last year and a half since then, right? Like the Empire Waste, writing with the Inner Enso, the Elder Ensemble. But I think what I think you also like I'm interested to hear you talk about, auditioning again. Like you touched a little bit on the like audition culture there. So like now back feeling better and auditioning again and like getting back into maybe some more acting classes, stuff like that. Like how does that feel? Like is that feeling all good, or is there any anxiety behind that too, or
Not necessarily anxiety. It's just I'm still on the ramp up.
mm,
And part of that onboarding ramp has been getting into a class that I love. I took class
mm,
with Tom Todoroff, who is just like this really great. This is a wonderful teacher who I find to be. I had very specific goals, and that I wanted to feel very challenged by a teacher and challenged by like a classroom environment. And I don't want to be, basically I kind of want to be the worst person in the class if I can. I want to put myself in a place where I can be really challenged and rise to it. And that's totally been that place for me as a studio. So in getting to reacquaint myself with my craft and learning material again, doing scene study, like getting in touch with those really core like skill development things again has been
mm,
like so much fun.
mm,
um and then I feel like the logistics of the onboarding into the other stuff is something I'm still working on, because obviously
yeah,
I'm really busy. I don't know if you've heard,
yeah.
but but that
I
is
didn't catch that.
but no, that is definitely like where I
Yeah,
want to see myself heading next, is getting back into regular auditioning again, for sure,
that's
because I
cool.
love to audition. That
Do
might be
you?
like psychopathic of me, but I love auditioning. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, you don't
Yeah.
hear that often. I
Yeah.
don't hear that often.
No, I love it. I think it could be really addicting,
Oh,
because
that's so cool.
it's that energy spike of like, I don't know. It's like when Simone Biles is going out. I mean, maybe not like that, but but whatever. Like that feeling of like okay, like how do I describe it?
Yeah.
It's like that
The
adrenaline jump.
adrenaline. Yeah, that's what it
Yeah,
sounds like. Yeah.
a lot of people that causes like cosmic dread. And for me, I'm like, yeah, I want a bunch of eyeballs on me while I,
Oh, that's awesome.
say some Chekhov. Like that sounds like a great Thursday afternoon. And some people are like,
That's
please don't.
amazing. That's
Yeah,
amazing. You're clearly in the right profession, right?
yeah, let's hope so.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah,
so good to hear that uh like that you get excited to audition. Yeah,
yeah,
that's really because
yeah,
I love it, but
definitely.
obviously it's I think you'd find more directors probably saying that than actors. Yeah.
Sure, sure.
Yeah. Yeah, that's super cool. Um what about so you're writing, you said this is like your first kind of the Inner Enso project is your first is it truly your first kind of like playwriting venture?
Yeah, at
Yeah.
least that has seen, that will have seen stem to stern,
Yeah.
soup to nuts,
That's
other
cool.
such idioms for beginning a project and
For the
actually
process.
completing
Yeah.
it. Yeah,
Page
yeah.
to stage. Yeah.
Right, page to stage. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like it's not just, my Google Doc folder full of
Sure.
42
Scenes and monologues, right?
faked ideas that like no
Right.
one ever sees.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it'll be the first project of that sort for me for sure.
That's
I've
awesome.
like contributed to other things in other ways,
Hmm.
but yeah, I'm really really excited about it.
That's super cool. And as all of our listeners and watchers will come to hear as we get into the winter and early spring, we'll be talking a lot more about that show coming up in the spring in New York in I think April, right? April, May in New York.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's super exciting. So for our New York audience, look forward to that, which is super cool. I've heard little bits and pieces here and there, and it sounds amazing. What about like let's skip back a little bit now. Let's pick up on so 13 Suits 2023, and we talked a lot about that experience. Now 13 Suits, and you had a nice little kind of intro to this in your five things game to me about like what's looking ahead now to 13 Suits 2024, which we did decide that is this current year,
That is
right?
definitely the year that we are in. Yeah,
Sweet.
I'm like
So
90% sure.
sweet. Yeah, me too. I'm 90% sure too. So if that's true, then we have a show coming up in a few
Right,
months,
right.
in a new city, an equally cool city, but a new city, entirely different audience, largely a new team, but with some folks from the New York show. So yeah, like I'd love to hear, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners who I happen to know are not only very familiar with 13 Suits, but big fans of the show. Um, yeah, what are you looking forward to? What do you take from, in addition to what you've already talked about in terms of your experience, taking from that production and looking forward to in the Chicago show?
One thing that I'm really looking forward to is taking this story, which is so specific to
Mm,
the Duffs and to Albany and
hmm.
to this community, um, and bringing it to a space where it's removed from that local context, but the
Hmm.
themes themselves are so universal that
Yeah,
literally no human being ever gets out of it. No one ever gets out of experiencing grief.
right.
So I'm really interested to see how this new audience is going to receive Pat's story and
Hmm.
and the way that it's going to land with them. Um, and I'm also really, really looking forward to just being in Chicago. Again, post injury, like this will probably be
Yeah.
one of my first chances to, which is something that I loved doing pre-pandemic and pre-injury. Was I loved contracts that would take me to go live in a different state for
Sweet.
2 months
Yeah.
or so, and get to just like be somewhere else for a while. So I'm so excited to explore Chicago,
Cool.
and work with a whole new group of artists. But I think,
That's,
yeah, it's bringing Pat's story to a
mm,
new audience is what I'm looking forward to most.
that's amazing. Have you been to Chicago before, or and if you have you experienced much of it?
I did this internship in Colorado when I was in college. and did not buy a plane ticket in time. So I was like, I'll just take the train. And it was like this manifest destiny ass style. Like, I'm like there with my pillow on the Amtrak, like going cross country. And I'm like, look at all these fields. But one of the places that we stopped was Chicago. I had like a layover there, and I think I got like a sandwich at like a local chain place, and I was like, I had my backpack and my pillow, and then I took my sandwich back to the train station. But that's like the extent of my
Cool.
Chicago travel story.
That's good to know because, Rachel and I have found Chicago to just be like this incredibly it's just like gem that we just have, we landed here, we didn't know what to expect, and we've like fallen in love with it, especially as a theater town. So to have you and the rest of the folks that are coming in from New York for the production here for like close to 2 months is just going to be amazing for you, because we're just really looking forward to all of you experiencing it too, because it's such a great theater town, art town. Just, yeah, it's a great place, and good
That's
sandwiches,
awesome.
as I'm
I'm
sure you
so
learned.
excited. Oh
Yeah.
yeah, and good sandwiches. That's the important
Yes,
thing.
super excited. Um, cool. So as we kind of head towards the end of this conversation in this episode, we usually land in this place of, going back to what we at the Outer Loop say, that, we intend this podcast to be about, right? Which is like, what are we here to do through the lens of art for social change? That's what the Outer Loop's here to do. And like the conversations that we're having with artists every week are, focused or centered around like, what are we each here to do as artists, or what do we feel like our purpose is, right? Like as an artist. So yeah, I mean, I'd love to hear, if you've given that any thought before this moment that I'm asking it to you. Yeah, like any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I go back to acting as an art of service
Mm,
is a core mantra of mine that I'd want to keep in mind. But I think in general, I'm really drawn to projects and to companies who have an ethos that is rooted in wanting to offer some real tangible ways to make the world better, not just through the art, which of course would be enough in itself, but that when those things are paired with very tangible dollar signs, I
sure,
find that very motivating.
yeah.
Especially, of course, when it's paired with great causes as well. So I
Mm,
love doing that. But I think in just a way to answer that question more for my essence is
mm,
um, I would really love to be. I have found it really valuable to in these last few years. I've spent a lot of time with my own shadows, and I'm really drawn to work, to plays, to films, to shows that really hold up a mirror to that self and make you want to laugh,
mm,
because it is funny. Like the darkness can be really funny, and sometimes like that's like the only thing that'll get you through. So I love work that can help lighten spirits while
mm,
also being honest about how much things suck sometimes,
yeah.
and and finding the humor in that, and being able to lift the joy out of those experiences in a way that acknowledges um, their full depth of them. You know what
Mm,
I mean?
yeah.
I don't know if that's a succinct way to answer that, but
Yeah.
that's what I feel drawn to.
Yeah, which, to me, I mean, not only is that beautiful to hear you say it that way, but I mean, as I'm sure comes as no surprise to you, why I think you and I connect, and why, we like to work together, and why like all the work that we're all doing feels like it overlaps a lot and work with a lot of the same people. Because I think, I mean, I would never be able to say it as beautifully as you did, but that's what I've always felt like the work that I want to be doing too is. And yeah, I mean, if we can do a little bit of that, right? Like
Yeah,
every time, then I feel like success, you know?
yeah, I
Yeah,
agree.
that's cool. Really cool. I feel, yeah, it's going to be an awesome, experience working with you again, because like just even in this conversation, I often use the phrase how sometimes my hope tank gets a little low, and
Hmm.
talking to you for this, 45 minutes or so has like filled my hope tank back up. So like what's going to
Yay.
be cool about you being in Chicago for this show is like my hope tank's going to be overflowing the whole time.
You're gonna
That's
be all
awesome.
hoped out. You're
I'm hoped
gonna
out. I'm gonna
you're
be
gonna be
hoped out.
hoped out, and
Sweet.
I'll try to put some holes in the bottom of the tank just
So
to
then,
like sow you with some like self
sweet,
doubt
sweet, sweet, awesome.
and despair to kind of offset things.
No need for that stuff. Just free flows all the
Right,
time.
right.
Um, no, this is an amazing conversation. Thank you so much, Katie. It's so cool to like reconnect, and it's so cool to
Yes.
share you with folks maybe who are listening or watching who don't know you. And so thank you for
Thank
that.
you. Thank you for having me, and thank you for bringing me to Chicago.
Yeah,
That in itself was like such an honor to be
yeah.
asked. So I'm
Mm.
so excited.
That's super cool. When we think, when Rachel and I sat down with Kathleen to talk even about the possibility of bringing the show here, and when we got to the point where we agreed that we were going to, yeah, I mean, to think of doing this show without, two or three key people, you being one of them, was like, I just, I don't know that
Oh,
it doesn't happen without, without you. So
that's
it's
so
super cool.
sweet. Thank you.
Well, no, of course, and thanks to everyone for listening. We, as you may know already, but if you don't, every Thursday, wherever you get your podcast, you can find us. You can also follow us on all of the social media channels and platforms that exist. Um, Katie, do you have social media channels or platforms that if folks are interested in following what you have going on, they could?
Yes. You can find me on Instagram at KD McTeigue, and that is pretty much the only
Sweet.
place that I'm social mediaing right now. I've
Nice.
been
Good
taking
for
a
you.
pretty big break, but
Good.
I'm in like a meme queen era, so you get to see some of that.
Nice. Sweet.
Yeah, yeah.
Awesome. We also like to always ask our guests every week if there's um, like a call to action that you might feel like you'd want to send out to everyone who's listening, something that you'd like people to do or
Yeah,
act in some way on.
for sure.
Yeah.
I think, and it might be a deceptively hard one to complete, at least that I find sometimes.
Mm.
But I think a call to action would be to consider what's one small way that you could show yourself a really big dose of kindness
Mm.
today or this
Mm.
week. A way to show yourself some gentleness. Because I think in general, a lot of us have a very well developed muscle for doing the opposite of that, and it would be cool to not. So
Yes.
that's my call to action is to
That's a good
find a
one.
way to
Yes.
be nice to yourself today.
That's a good one. Yeah, I need to definitely do that.
Yeah, I wouldn't know
Um,
anything about that. So
yeah. Cool. Well, thank you for that. And yeah, as we sign off, just a reminder to everyone, if you ever want to reach out to us, if you have suggestions or questions or want more info, you can email us at podcast@outerlooptheater.org. And again, thanks to KD, thanks to everyone, and we will see you next week. Bye, everyone. Thank you.